In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and been widely regarded as a bad move. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams is a comedy science fiction novel about Arthur Dent, who is protesting against the demolition of his house by lying in the way of the construction equipment that is interrupted by his friend Ford Prefect, who tells him that the Earth will soon be destroyed and that Arthur needs to come with him. This event then leads into the creation and development of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas Adams is a wonderful writer. He crafts his words in a way that is entertainingly intelligent. His comedy is so smart, witty, and well thought out. He writes a comedy that is deep and complex, while still approachable and enjoyable for a mainstream audience. Adams writes some interesting, entertaining, and unique characters, from Marvin, a depressed robot that I personally compare to Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, to Ford Prefect, an alien traveling the universe to write a new version of a pre-existing book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The characters are all unique in their own ways. Arthur Dent is our protagonist, a clueless and confused hero with little to no heroic traits to him. He is taken along with the remainder of the cast on this magical journey through space and sometimes ends up doing things to save them, but it's almost always a last-minute decision that he makes because he might as well try to do something. Unlike our regular science fiction protagonist, he doesn't think things through. He just does them and maybe they'll work, or he does nothing at all in hopes that the problem will then fix itself. The idea of Arthur Dent is in itself a joke. He is the opposite of everything you would expect in a science fiction story's hero. He can barely even be called a hero due to his mentioned lack of heroic qualities. One of my favorite passages is the Babelfish passage. This passage is about how this species of fish could not have developed naturally, due to it being able to be a universal translator that crosses the language divide between species and therefore proves and disproves the existence of God. The argument about this goes as such. I refuse to prove that I exist, says God, for proof denies faith, and without faith I am nothing. But, says man, the Babelfish is a dead giveaway, isn't it? It could not have evolved by chance. It proves you exist, and so therefore, by your own arguments, you don't. QED. Oh dear, says God, I hadn't thought of that, and probably vanishes into a puff of logic. Oh, that was easy, says man, and for an encore goes on to prove that black is white and gets killed on the next zebra crossing. This passage is a clear example of Adams' brilliant comedy. The way he takes something creative, intelligent, and thought-provoking and makes it humorous while still keeping these qualities is wonderful. He also has descriptive words in his sentences to enhance the descriptions and the comedy itself. The line of God's style that ends improperly vanishes in a puff of logic is a great example of this. He writes something witty and comedic yet intelligent. One thing this book does sometimes is it will put an asterisk next to certain words or phrases and then have a passage at the bottom of the page to explain this thing that the asterisk was put next to. One of my favorites of these passages is the one about how the Vorgon president is not like our version of a president and our image of a president. They have little to no power and are entirely a social and cultural figure. They are aggressive and commanding people with a charming enough personality to be a well-recognized and respected figure to a society, but that's about it. They aren't good political figures. I think that this is a commentary on the American society and democracy. Adams is commenting on how some, possibly many, or all in his eyes, American presidents are glorified celebrities and are social figures that appeal to and are liked by the people. They perform little to no political actions and are just social figures to represent America. There's not much more substance to them, and he's using this new species that he's created to play on that, to create satire about that. The tone of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is shrouded in dark and dry humor. It takes events like the Earth being destroyed and makes them humorous instead of atrocious and devastating. For example, here is a passage where Arthur thinks about the Earth being destroyed. There is no way his imagination could feel the impact of the whole Earth having gone. It was too big. He prodded his feelings by thinking that his parents and his sister had gone. No reaction. He thought of all the people he had been close to. No reaction. Then he thought of a complete stranger he had been standing behind in the queue at the supermarket before and felt a sudden stab. The supermarket was gone. Everything in it was gone. Nelson's column had gone. Nelson's column had gone, and there would be no outcry because there was no one left to make an outcry. From now on, Nelson's column only existed in his mind. England only existed in his mind. His mind stuck here in this dank, smelly, steel-lined spaceship. A wave of claustrophobia closed in on him. England no longer existed. He got that. Somehow he got it. He tried again. America, he thought, has gone. He couldn't grasp it. He decided to start smaller again. New York is gone. No reaction. He never seriously believed it existed anyway. The dollar, he thought, had sunk forever. Slight tremor there. Every Bogart movie has been wiped, he said to himself, and that gave him a nasty knock. McDonald's, he thought. There was no longer any such thing as a McDonald's hamburger. He passed out. When he came round a second later, he found he was sobbing for his mother. This passage is also a wonderful example of the dark yet entertaining comedy of this book. The despair and distraught of the earth's death aren't what devour this passage. Instead, it's the comedic aspect of it. The jokes of this passage are what stand out and make it so great and well written. Arthur doesn't react when he thinks about the loss of his parents, yet breaks when he realizes that the supermarket is now gone. The thought that makes Arthur faint is when he realizes that McDonald's is now gone. The world has lost such a source of mediocrity. Jokes like this are what make this book so much fun. The jokes are dark and light-hearted at the same time, and the balanced contrast is something unique and spectacular. The setting of this book is alternating and changing, but primarily as a backdrop setting. The setting is the universe. The universe ties our story together in sets, as is implied in the backdrop setting title, a backdrop. Integral settings are traveled to and used throughout, such as the Heart of Gold, the ship that our characters spend a good amount of time on. There are not very many settings in the story, yet all are well explained, built, and used. This book has become prevalent in modern pop culture, and one example of such prevalence is a reference Ted Cruz made in Neil Gorsuch's court confirmation hearing. Here's the video of said reference.
On a lot of weighty matters, so let me start with something lighter, and a topic on which I believe you have some familiarity. What is the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything?
42.
Thank you, Judge. And for those who are watching who may be a bit confused at this exchange, could you explain what it is to which we're referencing?
Well, Senator, sometimes we have young people who come to court to be sworn in. Often they're my law clerks. There are a couple of them right there. They haven't enjoyed this privilege yet. And they come to court and they're very nervous. And the clerk tells us about their career and their record, and then submits them to the court. I move their admission to the bar. Are there any questions from the bench? And it's sort of like this. It's a bit intimidating. This has been a reminder to me of what it's like to be down here rather than up there. And the last time I had this kind of interaction with Senator Lee, it was when he was down here and I was up there. At any rate, I sometimes ask them that question to put them at ease. And they all know the answer, and they all know the answer because they've all read Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And if you haven't read it, you should. It may be one of my daughter's favorite books, and so that's a family joke.
Well, it is a book I very much enjoyed as well, and it is, I think, a delightful example of the humanity of a judge that your record has demonstrated.
As you can see, Ted Cruz is such an easy guy to relate to if you're an uncomfortable middle-aged man that resembles a famous criminal. He really tries to be approachable and relatable to the infamous millennial generation, but instead makes most of the court a little uncomfortable and possibly confused. Despite Cruz's execution and the court's reaction, it still goes to show the impact Hitchhiker's Guide has made on pop culture. The book is a cult-like following, yet still has a mainstream appeal and fan base. As, what's his name again? Neil Gorsuch? I may be mispronouncing that. One thing which is in the video is how his daughter loves this book, and he's just some, like, random political dude with a random daughter, and she happened to like the book, and maybe that doesn't say too much, but I feel like it says something at least. This book is a book to transcend time, space, and generations. And by time and space, I mean bookstores.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams is an iconic sci-fi novel that has captivated audiences both on and off the big screen. For so long I've heard and seen references from the story and was excited to dive into this book to understand what all the fuss is about. and why 42 seemed to be everyone's new favorite number. Here to accompany us on this journey is my turtle pill pet Cooper, to give you something nice to look at as I delve into this novel. So, the story opens on the humble home of our hapless protagonist, the middle-aged, rather cranky Arthur Dent. He's going about his day as we all do, putting on his pants one leg at a time, waking up to the loud hum of obnoxious yellow bulldozers ready to plow down his home to set up a new bypass. These events lead into the book's first example of its key pull factor, its clever use of satirical humor. As Arthur lays himself in the mud in front of his home, he's greeted by his longtime friend, Ford Prefect, who's not from around here, being that he's from a new planet altogether. Ford is a Betelgeusian, not of our world, and as such doesn't understand things such as sarcasm. As Ford asks if Arthur is very busy at the moment, he sarcastically responds, "Am I busy? Well, I've just got all these bulldozers and things to lie in front of because they'll knock down my house if I don't. But other than that, well, not especially. Why?" This novel is flooded with humor like this, from the guide's somewhat vivid description of the pan-galactic gargle blaster, an insanely potent alcoholic beverage, to the constant little knocks on the frailty and incompetence of humanity as viewed by the various extraterrestrials throughout the book. I mean, seriously, the only description of the Earth in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is that it's mostly harmless, and not much else. The story is put into motion by the Earth's attack by the Vorgons. The Vorgons are a race of extraterrestrials that put Arthur's sour attitude to shame. They're lean, mean, and on a mission to clear away the planet Earth to make room for a hyperspace express route, a rather ironic turn of events considering what was happening to Arthur's home at the time. But this major conflict was what forces Arthur and Ford into space and marks the beginning of their journey. On the journey, they meet a whole host of characters that make quite a few strong, dramatic foils. From the beginning, we have Arthur and Ford, who fill contrasting foils, where Arthur is rather cranky, short, and may come off as whiny or churlish at times. Ford assumes the archetype of the goofy sidekick, providing a more optimistic tone to almost every sign of danger. Being a researcher for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Ford also has a deep understanding of his studies and the guide at his disposal, where Arthur tends to be a little in the dark. In fact, through the entire story, a lot of his comedic humor comes from the fact that he really has no idea what's going on and is led astray due to that. While Ford has wisdom from his travels, he lacks the skill of our next major character, Zaphod Beeblebrox, the two-headed, three-armed extraterrestrial and president of the galaxy. Although Zaphod may seem rather manic at times in the story, he also has a history of being somewhat of a crook. I mean, in the story, he steals a ship, in any case, which takes some level of finesse, if you will. Some of the actions that he does do take planning and cunning on some level, which is why I put him on par with Ford in the sense that he has a sort of wisdom, if you will, although in a different form, and it's not always there in all cases. He compares to Arthur in the sense that they both have somewhat for themselves in terms of how they act. They mainly act trying to get by in a sense, though Arthur mainly does so because he's confused and has no idea what's going on, whereas Beeblebrox is just kind of a jerk. It's kind of hard to compare the characters at times, past that, seeing that they're all very different from Zaphod's girlfriend, Trillian, who is just described as being a beautiful and radiant and very intelligent character who acts in a very strong manner, but not much past that. And then, of course, there's the depressed robot Marvin, who also has his own form of comic relief in a very Eeyore-like manner. They're all very different, which to me really added to the story, because the story has a lot of another satirical element in incongruency in the fact that there are events like when Ford and Arthur are first on the Heart of Gold and the ship distorted reality. Ford turned into a penguin for a bit. Arthur was losing his limbs, and just there are moments like that that really create a confusing moment that made you think, what did I just read? But it's that in the book that makes it so fun and lighthearted and interesting, and that kind of humor that really draws people in and makes it a joy to read.
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is by far my favorite book. It doesn't have a deep cast of characters or a unique setting or thrilling story, or what usually drives me to like a story, but instead it thrives on its extremely satirical style of humor. The story is driven by a never-ending stream of irony, reversals, and incongruity. It isn't to say the characters and story isn't interesting, but they take a back seat to the frequent comedic scenarios in the story. My favorite character is Marvin, a clinically depressed robot that can never seem to find motivation for anything. I enjoy Marvin's character because I've always been interested in robot or cyborg characters. For example, Mega Man, or the characters in Nier Automata. But more importantly, normally in sci-fi, robots are portrayed as emotionless or task-driven, so seeing a robot that has an extreme mental disorder that lacks motivation to perform any task was an interesting take on the robot character archetype. Another character I liked was Arthur. He was the main character, but not really the protagonist, which is something I like when done right in stories. It's sometimes nice to see the story from the eyes of the sidekick, and since Arthur is just a normal human, he plays the role of sidekick to Ford and Zaphod quite well. Arthur was quite annoying and pretty whiny at times, but overall, I thought he was pretty likable. At least I liked him. There was some sort of relatable quality about him, seeing as how normal he was. It's hard to narrow down just a few of my favorite examples of Adam's comedic style, but I'll try anyway. I really enjoyed the part where Arthur was in Slarda Bartfast's office. The quote is, "He gestured Arthur towards a chair, which looked like it had been made out of the ribcage of a stegosaurus." It was made of the ribcage of a stegosaurus, explained the old man. I found that part really funny. I think it had something to do with the comedic timing, as well as the reversal. Normally when authors are describing something as, "it looked like it was made out of blank," the object is not actually made of that material, especially when this description is so specific. To me, that joke is the equivalent of saying, "Gold. It's worth its weight in gold." Perhaps the reason I found this particular joke so funny is because I'm easily amused by anti-jokes, which this is similar to, in the sense that it uses a reversal plus an immediate punchline. Other jokes I liked was the Babelfish versus God joke, which Teddy already talked about, and the learning to fly joke, because you see, learning to fly is more of like gaining a knack to throwing yourself at the ground and missing, rather than learning any techniques. I also thought the whale and pot of flowers were funny, especially because they're set up early, then referenced later in the story, and in Mostly Harmless, the 5th book in the series, in which the flowers come back for their revenge on Arthur. The climax of the story is when the group gets to Magrathia, a planet that hoards majority of the galaxy's riches due to being able to manufacture entire planets for the wealthy. While there, the meaning of life, the universe, and everything is explained to Arthur, and that the Earth was built to figure out the question to the life, the universe, and everything. Arguably more important than the answer. However, it is then revealed that the mice Trillian brought along with her through the voyage were actually pan-dimensional hyper-intelligent beings that wanted to buy Arthur's brain from him. You see, Arthur's brain is one of the last pieces of organic Earth, and is likely to, seeing how close the answer was to being discovered, only a mere 5 minutes away. It's very likely that Arthur's brain still contains the ultimate question, which the mice plan to sell. Arthur understandably refuses the offer, but the mice won't take no for an answer. However, before they can forcefully take it, a group of cops show up, who are after Zaphod for stealing the Heart of Gold. As you can see, a lot of crazy stuff goes on at the end. It's very hectic. One of the most prevalent themes of Hitchhikers is the utter insignificance of humanity. The whole book, characters, and even the narrator are talking about how lame humans are compared to other creatures and species, going as far to tease humans for their obsession with digital watches, to Ford describing the Earth as mostly harmless. Everyone seems eager to take a stab at humans in particular. Even mice and dolphins are in on the joke, both of which are smarter than humans and have been for a long time. What I really liked about Hitchhikers, though, is that usually I have a hard time getting emotionally invested in books, shows, or games if the story or main characters aren't the main focus or are done poorly. But Hitchhiker's got me to actually laugh and have physical responses to the story, and for that I admire it a lot. Douglas Adams is an amazing author, and I've read the rest of the series too, and I enjoyed The Restaurant at the End of the Universe and Life, the Universe, and Everything a lot. But the last two books, well, I get why the series is referred to as a trilogy of 5 books. They weren't necessarily bad per se, but they didn't feel like they fit the first 3 books at all. Also, they were just really confusing. I did enjoy the 5th book more than the 4th, however, but it still felt a bit off even if it was closer to the original 3. And I feel like overall, my experience with the series may have been better if I had only read the first 3, which is a shame.